forget, because I was one time I was like talking for like 10-15 minutes with this guest, and we were getting into it. And I was like, oh fuck, I forgot to record. So no. For the people listening right now, the main thing is that we last talked on a podcast about 4 years ago. Lots of stuff has happened. The world has changed radically since then. And we were just talking now before I hit the record button that one of the things I truly appreciate about you, Maija, is that every now and then you comment on something that I post online, and we get into a discussion. I cannot I don't think we've ever had like an exchange where it got nasty or anything along those lines. It was always an honest, open discussion, even though we disagreed. And you bring your point of view, I try to bring mine. We discuss, and like last time, said, okay, I agree with that. I don't agree with that. Awesome. We can move into the next thing and talk. Like it used to be in my recollection, there were once upon a time this was not controversial. This was supposed to be the standard. So that's what I really appreciate, and I wish there was a whole lot more of it. I'm just getting very tired of all the polarization and just immediately, and it's not a good thing, but tend to, when I see these kind of discussions immediately devolve into talking points, then I'm like, okay, there's really no point here anymore, because you bring nothing new to the table. You've already labeled me as XYZ, which in my case, like I'm politically an orphan. Every single party that I voted for abandoned me. So now I've been politically homeless for a very long time. For the listeners, I live in Europe, in Belgium, so I don't vote in the US, I vote here. But if you want to see interesting politics, check out Belgium. And so I'm like, I'll criticize everybody equally if I think it's wrong. I just posted this poem from Anton van Wilderode, interesting guy, which is basically saying like, look guys, I'll just be me, and if I don't like it, if I think it's bad, I'll just say it. I'm not looking for a fight, but I'll say if I think this is bad. And you do that also, I think, but in a much more eloquent way than I do. So always thank you for those exchanges. I very much appreciate it.
Oh yes, no, always. I also appreciate you and your ability to do that. I think social media has been an interesting influence on people. I think the phrase familiarity breeds contempt is coming true, because I think most of us who lived quite a long time before social media came understood that you didn't really know what people thought, and it was pretty good that way. We all got along. It was not a problem. But now everybody's opinions are out there, everybody's darkest thoughts almost, everybody seems to want to blurt and contribute, and so now we're like, ugh. You look at other people and you're like, oh, they're not the person I thought they were. What's up with that? And I think there's some interesting ideas. This sort of inability to disagree, I think, has many different threads to it. I think on a big scale, there's a lot more fear in the world right now. I think it's exacerbated by social media, but also global politics, which also might be tied into social media and the ability to communicate, and the democratization of war and conflict in a lot of ways. It's like everybody can play now. And so we've become much more afraid of the other, or people that are not like us. So I think that's a sort of a kind of a meta state, a zeitgeist that we're sort of all living under. But then also on a personal level, I think I think it's related to this fear, is that we have segregated ourselves into it's this or that, where the more interesting discussion is that it's both things, and maybe you find this part more important and I find this part more important. So it's not like you're wrong or I'm right or whatever it is. It's that both things are important, but what's important to you from your point of view is you see these pieces and I see these pieces, but they're actually all part of the whole. And how do we unwrap that as to, also, about you, how is it that you think and came to those viewpoints, but also this idea that all of it can be true at the same time, and to be able to appreciate all the parts that I don't see, maybe you have or other people have, but then maybe you don't see something that I have, and so then I can share with you and go, oh, that's interesting, I never really thought about that before. But I think it's a big skill, because underlying it is this huge fear, and if you're afraid, you're going to see people that disagree with you as threat, and then you're going to, get that kind of bunker mentality and that separation idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. And for me, it's just, I mean, everything you said, I agree with. I see it just as this gigantic loss that happened in society because it's so polarized, and this duality thinking. It can only be one of these two issues or one of these two answers to the question. It's just a massive waste. And not that long ago, I was talking to somebody about it, and I said, look, it. There used to be a time where we talked about perspective or frame of reference, or the old cliche cartoon of you see a six lying on the ground and there's two people standing on opposite ends looking at it. One says six, the guy on the other side says it's a nine, and they're both right.
Yeah,
and this whole
right.
concept of there's more than one right answer to many questions, and if you can't see that, then you're ideologically captured. It doesn't matter what your ideology is. You're blind, or you're stuck in some sort of dogma that you can't get out of. We're human beings. We're all prone to that. We all eventually, fall short of our aspirations of thinking rationally, thinking logically, being correct in our reasoning, and so on. Eventually, we fail. That should, from my opinion, be like the starting position. Like, where am I messing this up? Where is my thought pattern wrong? Which logical fallacies am I falling victim to, and so on, so that you can A, avoid them, and B, if you can't, try to correct when they're pointing out to you. But then you have to kill your ego first, and that is a discipline. That is extremely difficult to do.
But again, don't you think that's related to the fear aspect? It's the ego exists, it's a survival mechanism. I read a long time ago, I can't remember, in somebody's book, that ego is what is a survival mechanism. And to survive is not to thrive, but to thrive means you have to make yourself vulnerable in a certain way. Yeah. So that means that you have to let go of the ego to learn more or thrive. It's like your ego knows how to stay alive and what's worked for you, and you're going to keep doing it. But to be able to say, oh, maybe I was wrong, has a different sense to it, to your own sense of, survival, I suppose. And so again, that fear overrides it. I think, for me at least, I don't ever set out to change anybody's minds. But one of the positive things about social media is you're actually you're not talking to one person. You're talking to a bunch of different people. So I think it's interesting because we do get into that confirmation bias of just seeing things that oh yeah, he said that, and yeah, we're on the same side, that kind of weird tribalism, then you say something different. But that I think it's very, very important for us that can disagree to add to the debate and show that there is more points of view than only one, or and the opposite, right? That we're adding to the idea of the complexity of the issue, so that hopefully people that don't know what they don't know can start to think. All we're really getting, this is what my goal, I suppose, is, or one of them is to get people to think more, instead of sort of sit in their kind of comfortable situations where they're like, well, all of this is true for me and it's fine, instead of going, oh, I'd never thought about that before, that's an interesting way of looking at it, why is that, to sort of engage in a slightly different way. And like you said, without ego necessarily. Like, I know that what you disagree with to me isn't because you hate me. Like, it's not, there's no personal part in that. It's a belief for you. I can go, oh, that's interesting. Well, I don't, and it doesn't matter. Like, you can believe what you want, and that's not a problem for me. It's kind of like, well, of course you would, because that's where you came from, and your experiences in life. So, that's interesting.
And again, just a bunch of good thoughts coming through my head. Like last weekend, Becky and I were at the coast with another couple and just talking, and I was asked the question, like, what do you think of this person? And I said, look, I don't know this person well enough. And the other said, like, oh, come on, give me an answer. Like, I can't give you another answer. I've seen this person twice, spent a few hours in their company, and for a variety of reasons, I don't think I'm adequately informed just yet. The only thing I can say is I don't see red flags right now.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. That's the most honest answer I can give you. I know you want to hear something more conclusive, but I can't give it to you. Now, maybe like 10 years ago, I would have said like, oh, XYZ, because I'm an opinionated bastard. I've always been, and I try to hold back that side of me, but I just, character flaws is not going to go away. But I've tried to rein it in a little bit more by forcing myself to look very hard at every time I make mistakes, and when I'm wrong, like flat out wrong about something, like, here dude, next time, maybe be more careful in judging people or things or whatever. And on the other side, it's human nature to want to just like, here's my opinion and this is it. And it's fun, and especially like me, I like to talk to people. I like to talk to people from all walks of life, and that's one of the most interesting things I think you can do. And then when you disagree with somebody, especially if it's about something that you hold dear or is a strong conviction of yours, well, like you said, the ego, it's hard to not see that other person as they're actually attacking me, because I so strongly believe in this. And then I get to the point where what I've finally managed to figure out, and again, I am Belgian, I got punched in the face a lot when I was younger, so please indulge me. It took me a while, but I think one of the reasons why I managed to get to this point is that I don't have just one thing in my life. And I think it's similar with you. My job is personal trainer. I've been heavily invested in martial arts and self-defense for the past 40 years. But I also write, which is something different. I like to make instructional videos, which is something different. I'm very much interested in a whole host of subjects that I've never talked about publicly, online or elsewhere, except people who know me well know that. It's not a secret, it's just that I don't feel the need to talk about it. And that's stuff that is actually very important to me. I'm a father. I have two great children that are adults and that are making their way in life. So I've got a bunch of other stuff that are really good in my life, that I feel happy about, that I feel maybe accomplished is not necessarily the word, but that a form of confidence is derived from those things that makes it more that it's a multifaceted aspect to my personality and the way I think, as opposed to I'm on one thing, I'm a martial artist, that's all I do, and I'm really good at it, and then somebody says, well, actually you suck, because look how poorly you did that. It's like everything in your worldview can shatter then, or it can be how can it not be personal if that's how you see yourself? So maybe that's something along those lines, that a lot of people have just this one thing, and then if you come anywhere close to that in a negative sense, then it's just all hell breaks loose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I think there might be something bigger there too, is our comfort with uncertainty. I think there's a kind of a weird insecurity and desperation where you have to have everybody like you, and that what you're doing is important and it's meaningful. There's sort of a strange need of people to always explain themselves and always be right. And you're like, it doesn't actually matter. My opinions about most things don't matter at all to anybody.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't think I do martial arts well, I don't know you. Maybe it's a good thing that you don't think I do it well, because who I wouldn't want your opinion about anything anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of none of our opinions actually matter that much, and maybe that's terrifying for a lot of people. It's like, maybe I'm a bad martial artist and I don't know. Does that really matter? I don't know, maybe, maybe I want to be fairly good at what I do, and I like the recognition that I'm on the right track. I think that is a sort of a satisfying sense. But I think our sense of our own self-importance is a little bit overblown, and also we just want to know. I think it's, politics or society is like a macrocosm of the martial arts, right? You teach self-defense, and self-defense, people want to know the right answer. It's all about having the right answer, and there isn't a right answer. And when you're just like, so much is uncertain, every situation's slightly different, all I can give you is ideas and guides how it's going to work, but you're not actually going to know. And I think that sense of uncertainty is very difficult for people. So if you have an internal sense of self or confidence, or maybe, you don't know, you might win or lose and you become more comfortable with that. It's like you'll try your best and what comes, and luck might be on your side or luck won't be on your side. You don't know which way it's going to go. That then you have a sense more of ease of being able to disagree, not being really able to know. I have people say
Yeah.
things that may or may not be true, right? There's you have to live in this different kind of uncertain world. I think is actually the superpower, maybe, that you're talking about, instead of certainty, which I think of as your like one thing, you know.
Yeah, and this, in a way, maybe connects well with the way you train and teach and so on. The idea of flow and not necessarily having set patterns and forms, um, is that there's not necessarily a right answer.
Right.
There's different parameters. How do they relate to each other? It's constantly changing, and that brings me to one of my favorite Thomas Sowell quotes: "Is there's no solutions, only compromises."
Yeah.
I think that is just, if there's a piece of wisdom that anybody should take with them throughout their life, I think that is a good one. If there are actually solutions that are not compromises, I'd love to see them because I haven't found them. And then one of the few claims to fame that I have is that I invented Randy's law, which is the differences are just as important as the similarities. Because we tend to see like, okay, yeah, I know this. Like, you have this in martial arts as well. You teach. How many times don't you have something like, oh yeah, I already know this, and you can, top of your head, list like 18 different things that he's doing differently from you. That are small differences, maybe, but they add up to something that is fundamentally not the same, even though it looks the same. And I think that mindset, just understanding that it's a really big world out there, Horatio, and there's a lot more things under under the heavens than dreamt of in your imagination. Yeah, that's kind of true for everything, and there's an upside to it, and that brings me to this old cartoon again, where you see somebody like, there's two ways to look at this. Nobody cares, and it's a guy who's almost crying, and next to him is a guy who's jubilant, like nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly.
This is awesome.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I,
that's kind of where I'm finding myself more and more. Is like, look, many years ago, I basically stopped caring what other people thought of me, except for the people that I'm close to and my loved ones.
yeah,
Those count.
yeah. Those do
If they
count.
if they if they give me criticism or negative feedback, that comes in hard, and I take that into account. And but everybody else is like, you don't know me, I don't know you. You're this random stranger who's yelling at me on the internet. I've had tons of those guys. You think you know what I'm talking about? I can see from what you just wrote is that you've got this big rant and you like missed everything,
I,
that I was talking about, and that's fine. It's just don't expect me to get upset over that. I'll just say
well,
bye.
I have to share my friend Dylan's. It's my favourite retort that my friend Dylan said. So if you ever have people like that, you basically say, "May all my opponents be as skilled as you."
That's nice. That's a very kind way of saying something actually
Yeah,
quite
it's
devastating.
yeah, very polite.
Yeah, I mean, was it last year or the year before? I don't remember. I wrote something. I called it "Reaching Out Across a Broken Bridge," because of the polarization in society and everything that's going on. And this is bigger than politics, postmodernism that I complain about all the time. And it's in economics. It's much bigger. You've got the Strauss-Howe generational theory, the fourth turning. You've got other theories. You've got Ray Dalio's take on it. And basically, the idea is that societies move in cycles, where things go up and down. And clearly, we are on a downturn right now, which means that eventually, things are going to get better again, and then eventually it's going to get worse again. So, I think there's a lot of criticism about those theories. I think there's, empirically speaking, there's something valid about it, and so I see it much more in this larger context, is that it's not just one thing. It's not just people are angry about, I don't know, the planet is going to hell. It's not just about society is decadent. It's not just about that. It's all these things combined. And we've had, Toby and I talked about this many times in the past few years. 2020 was a crazy year with the pandemic. 2021 was not less crazy than 2020. 2022 was not less crazy than 2021, and so on. And 2025, which is only halfway through, already is going, in my opinion, off the charts in how nuts it's getting. I mean, we've got the Middle East is on fire. We've got one war still going on. We've got everybody's going nuts. So
yeah, but
bound to see what happens next.
I guess I have two things to say to that. One, I think the cyclical nature of things is well known. It's ancient Indian philosophy, ancient Chinese philosophy, the Zhou-yi, or as we know it, the I Ching. It's like the book of changes. It's like nothing can be sustained and be stable all the time. There's always, it reaches its peak and then it goes in a different direction. I think we in the West again have this binary thinking that it's good or it's bad, but the thing that I think the West doesn't have in the same way as the more older cultures of the East and even the Middle East have is this sense of time. It's like now, soon, later, far later. What, is there are different times that you don't know what's bad now isn't going to be good later, or what's good now is going to cause something worse to happen. It's like everything is cause and effect, but that effect will resonate through time to create something way later. It's like you don't know yet whether the chaos in the Middle East or Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a good or a bad thing at this point. It's terrible right now. All these things are terrible right now. People are losing their lives. It's really, really tragic. But, you have bigger philosophical questions like, can we avoid war forever? I know Europe thought so. They thought we were done with it after World War II, right? I mean, it was just kind of like, thankfully we've got that out of our heads. It was totally terrible, and now we're never going to do that again. Let's do money instead and capitalism. This is much better. We'll trade. Nobody will ever go to war, right? And in a sense, it's like that has a logical reasoning to it. But it wasn't true. All it took was one, Putin invading, and suddenly it was, oh shit, we're still doing this. Europe is completely not ready for the. Are we doing this again? And so there was this idea that we were over it, and turns out we're not. So
you mentioned a second thing.
Oh yes, I think about. I don't necessarily think this is the craziest time in history. I don't think necessarily it's the craziest time since the 80s. I mean, obviously we've forgotten from 1945 to 1925. What's that? 80 years. What war was. I was just talking about this actually on the internet the other day. It's that everybody that was an adult in my childhood lived through World War II. All my teachers, all the shopkeepers, the mail carrier, like everybody, my parents, my grandparents, everybody lived through World War II. So that the presence of war was very much a part of my childhood. And then we had the Vietnam War, we had 6-day conflict in Israel. We had so many things. The Soviet Union rolled into Czechoslovakia. It's like a stacked on top of each other, one on top of the other one. I remember when the first Gulf War broke out too, and everybody was like, "Oh no, this is nuclear Armageddon." It's never not there. We had Able Archer in 1983, where
I forget.
Where everything almost totally kicked off. So it's not weird now, it's just weird compared to what it was 20 years ago. I don't think it's worse now, especially throughout history. I actually think we've been in an incredibly lucky phase of life, that we've all had this amazing growth in our prosperity, in the West at least, right? Look how many people are well fed and have jobs and houses and all this. It's like throughout history, none of that was true.
No.
So in a sense, we're so lucky. It's just that people don't like having things taken away from them. It's like you had so much and now there's not quite as much, and suddenly you're like, oh no, we're on the downhill turn. It's like, are we though? It's like if you really look at it, it's a bit more scary. There's more fear. Like I said, the fear kind of manifests and creates its own little weather system around it. And, if you don't mind me tying this back into our first point, it's one of the reasons why on my page, on Facebook, for instance, I encourage all views. It's like, this is my kitchen table. Everybody can come and let's talk about stuff. because otherwise that fear will just get worse and worse. The weather system it creates will get worse and worse. The polarization will kind of kick in. So on a very, very tiny individual level, I'm trying to subvert that spiral, try and stop the momentum, if you like. And I think that's something that you do too.
Yeah, for the longest time, I didn't want any politics on my social media and on my blog, just because I saw that I didn't really want to talk about it. I was too much focused on the stuff that I was writing and so on. But eventually, I changed that policy and said, look, that there's just no way. Everything is political now, and that didn't used to be the case.
No.
But now due to polarization. Pick a topic, it's gonna be political. So there's no escape, right? And the other thing that I added is there's gonna be rules. If you start name calling, you're out. I don't care, who you are and how valid your point is. There's rules to being an adult and doing a reasonable discussion that is worthwhile. If you're just basically, spewing some bile because that's what you feel like when something that you read from somebody who's on the other side of that argument triggers you, do it elsewhere. Don't do it on my page. It's a big internet out there. Plenty of places you can do it, but I have no patience for it. The only downside is that my pages online have gotten quite big and are just unmanageable. And I can't imagine how people with hundreds of thousands of followers or millions, I'm sure they must have, I don't know, people they employ that follow that up, but I can't. It just goes nuts. So I basically give up. Facebook and Instagram, they show me comments. They don't show me everything.
Well, you have to click on the all comments and get out of the most relevant section. Yes.
Even then, they don't give me everything. It's just untenable. So I'm like, okay, I cannot police this. But going back to what you just mentioned, I think an interesting frame of reference that I use nowadays from Balaji Srinivasan, who I like a lot. He says that you can look at a lot of aspects of society, look at it in this matrix. You look at societies that are ascending and descending. There's many countries, let's say we would call third world countries, that are actually improving. Living standards are improving. There's many Western countries where in certain places that's actually going downhill. So they are descending. And then you've got another axis, and that's centralization and decentralization, where things are getting organized and getting put together and start working better, or where I think where many Western countries are, things are breaking apart. The institutions are failing, the governments are failing, and everything is just decentralizing, and that means eventually new things will pop up. Typically, you don't fix a large organization. It tends to break down, or it gets replaced by a new one that takes over and just dwindles away eventually. So I like those two axes that you can use just as a frame of reference, because it takes it away from politics. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with just human nature and how people, how human beings in large groups like societies actually act, and how that goes through cycles, how it evolves, and so on.
Yeah, related to that, I do think we are in a zeitgeist which you can't actually stop. I like the phrase where, brake less, steer more, because I don't think you can stop this wave. It has to the madness has to peak and crash, and we have to get on the other side of it, which what that'll look like, I'm not really sure. But I do like to think of two questions that I'm always asking. One is, it's bad now, compared to what?
Yeah.
Compared to what? And it's like, when are you talking about? It's like, what does that matter? And then again, this binary idea of it's going up or down always thinks like it's getting worse. What happens if it just took a turn off to the side? Wasn't there a big study? I think they were in a baboon troop or something like that, and everybody wanted to be the alpha baboon, and then they realized that the happiest baboons are actually this guy who's in the back, who's like a beta seta or something baboon, who had all the ladies that were not the most popular ladies, having a very nice life and just ignoring the stupidity of trying to be the alpha. He had all these girlfriends and he just stayed out the way. It's like, that's not worse because you're not like the king.
Yeah.
So fragmentation isn't necessarily bad. Might be more chaotic, there might be more vultures, there might be more birds of prey trying to like snatch stuff, obviously. So it might be less safe, can we say? But does that mean it's worse? You know, there's a science fiction novelist that was one of my favorites growing up was Michael Moorcock, and he never had good and evil. He had law and chaos. Those are his two poles. So too much law, it completely stagnates. Too much chaos, obviously not good either. There's actually a balance between the two that makes life stable enough so that people can make plans and have hopes, and this idea of time continuing, but it can't be so stable that people kind of calcify. You know, I think it's a much more interesting kind of spectrum to look at things on instead of good and bad, you know.
Yeah, makes sense to me, and uh, reminds me of Chesterton's fence. Is that, you know, don't take away a fence unless you know why it was put there. And the old example that they always give is that, you know, there's a fence somewhere out in the country, been there for decades, nobody knows why. Let's get rid of it. Got more space then, and then a year later the wolves show up again, because that was why it was put in place, to keep the wolves out. And after a while the wolves saw there's a fence there, we can't go there, okay, we leave, they go elsewhere. But then after the fence is taken down, just a half year later, whatever, one wolf comes by, he notices that's gone, and that day he doesn't go any further. But eventually one wolf goes further on, and he starts exploring that new place where humans have settled it. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, there's a metric ton of interesting things here, stuff I can eat. Awesome, all the wolves come join me. I'm oversimplifying, but that's kind of the idea. Is a lot of information often is lost, and ties into what you said about, you know, people not knowing what war is like and why we really don't want to have it. And that ties in with what I wanted to say, when, you know, how bad is it compared to what my dad, who passed away a long time ago, he was a child during the Second World War. And what him and his friends would do is steal munition from the Germans who were occupying his city, and then just, you know, uncap everything and pour it out on the windowsill, and then light a match and see it just go off. That was his youth. That was like, okay, dude, we survived, and not everybody did, of course, because it's war and it's horrible. But like, life went on, and, you know, in many ways, that was just, you have to get through it. And that's how I see these times as well, which is what I've said to my kids. So look, there's going to be a lot more bad stuff as well, and for a variety of reasons. Just get through to the other side. And there's going to be better, quote unquote, better times as well, where things are maybe less polarized, and that there's maybe hopefully a little bit less war. But right now, this is what we've got. Nothing you and I can do about it. Try not to be victimized. Try not to get crushed by conflict, by, you know, the system, the machine, the state, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Doesn't mean play it safe. Live your life. I mean, my son just spent months in Switzerland doing his last internship. There's a good chance that he's going to end up living and working there. My daughter just got promoted to senior consultant in a really big firm. She's working her ass off, making her way in life, and she's going to go deep sea diving in a few weeks. Awesome, go for it.
So, I have a question for you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead. No, I was done. Go.
So if we relate the macro to the micro, so we have war and conflict on a big scale, and then we have self-defense. I think there is a difference between pretending something's not going on that you have to deal with, and so you basically face the threat and you accept the information for what it is, and you have to deal with it, and pretending that it's not there, and warmongering, right? So it's like you don't want war, but at some point when you can't avoid it, or like there is a threat, you avoid threat, you try not to be there when something happens, but when something is happening, you can't pretend it's not happening. So how do you think that people should navigate that feeling? Because for me, I understand the impetus to avoid war, obviously. Like I said, I grew up with parents that grew through it. Talking about fathers, my father was evacuated, my family was in Finland during the war. My father was evacuated from the east to the west, and with a bunch of kids, and he was going to play soccer for you Americans, with some friends, and they had to walk through like a path to get there, and he hung back for some reason, and they all got blown up by munitions, so he escaped death that way. So it's like that's very real to me. Those epigenetic feelings of war, for sure. But at some point, when are they coming? You know, how do you tell people to sort of navigate that? That when do you stand your ground? When do you defend yourself? When do you say it's coming and we have to be ready for it? Just like in self-defense, you can't pretend that you're not getting mugged or dragged away to a, you know,
Yeah.
secondary crime scene. You know, it's like when. I don't think people know when. I don't know people. I don't think people know, have that sense of now's the time. I can't pretend it's not happening. But how do you not become
Yeah.
paranoid and have that sort of ability to walk
That's a
through it?
great question. Um, a few things. If from I'll talk about self defense first, and then look at bigger conflicts. Purely talking about self defense, I think the best advice that I ever got on that front is that you have to think this through before you need it. So you have to figure out where are my lines. For a few simple ones, and anyone who hits one of my children or my wife, I am going to leap into heroic action, as one of my friends would say, preferably before they actually get hit. That would be even better. But anybody who comes at them, there can be no hesitation. I have to go, even if that means really bad things for me. I don't think I would be able to live with myself if I didn't. So that doesn't mean, well, it's time to go Rambo and be stupid about it. No. there's many situations, scenarios that you can think of where just immediately going after the threat is not the best solution. So it's a more complex thought process than just like, oh, I'll just do something. More is involved in that. But the whole point is that you need to know where your red lines are, and actually defend them. Because if you don't defend red lines, they get just stepped on. That is the essence of a red line. So I think that's a huge part of it, and is developing your own sense of parameters where you say like this. Compare it to, let's say, this is my military doctrine. This is how I'll go about things. These are the tools that I have. This is my strategy and tactics, and these are my overall goals. And that includes, this is what I defend. This I will defend. What that is, I think that's individual. It's going to be very different for you than it will be for me and somebody who's living all the way in China, whatever. So that would be my first thought. The second aspect is that, well, then you have to actually do the work to be able to do that. What that means will again be very individual, but you do have to put some time and effort in there and determine, okay, does that mean weapons? If that means weapons, which ones? Do you mean a legal weapon that you can carry? And if you can't, well, you're going to do something else about that. And how? And then we look at training. Will you train for that? Does your significant other also train, or is it all up to you? And all this avalanche of questions comes at you, which you have to think through and talk with people about, and so on. And eventually, I think you can get to the point where you have a reasonably coherent frame of reference for those things. And then it boils down to preparing and training, which doesn't have to be, paranoid, thinking that you have to lock yourself up in a nuclear bomb shelter. But you do have to put in some effort, like you do with anything else. I mean, like you do with if you're a carpenter, you're going to take care of your tools, or you won't have a lot of work. It's not going to go all that well for you. You paint, so I'm pretty sure that your brushes are doing a-okay. That you don't just like toss them in the back of the truck and we're done with it after you finish painting something. So that would be just top of my head for on a personal level. If we look at geopolitics and the larger scale country conflict, bunch of things. The defense dilemma, which is completely ignored nowadays. So defense dilemma means that if one country feels threatened and it starts preparing for their neighbor who is, looking mighty aggressive at them, so they start defending themselves by building up their army, buying weapons and so on. Their neighbor sees that and they're like, holy crap, they're going to attack us. We better start preparing ourselves. And they build up this big force and so on. And this escalation ladder keeps going. So it's always a balancing act. And this is what I find is completely lacking in most discussions nowadays. I'm going to talk briefly about the Middle East. Is that so? Iran was bombed. The nuclear facilities were bombed by Israel and the United States. Iran reacted by bombing some base. I think it was in Qatar, but I'm not sure anymore. It was an abandoned base. Everybody was gone, if I'm not mistaken, and they actually warned the base, the Americans, like, look, we're going to send missiles and bomb the crap out of that thing. And then a lot of people online are like, ha ha, they warned us, ha ha, losers. No, they're trying not to escalate further than they have to, because they know that if they go too far, the other side's going to go tit for tat, and then it ends up just blowing up everybody. So this balancing act in war is something that with smart, leaders and military generals and so on, tends to happen. With the less smart ones, not so much. So that's a big aspect to it. And then the other one is deterrence failure. Is that if you don't do that well, they're not going to care about your red line, because you haven't given them a reason to not step over it. Mm-hmm. So I told this story before, and it's a little bit adjacent to what we're talking about now, but it's the easiest way to explain it. Is that many years ago I was working as a trainer for a big company, and we had this client that I had to go to, and then the sales rep of the company I work with showed up. He wasn't supposed to be there. So, and he introduces himself and says, I'm actually a blowhard. I'm like, okay, that's nice to meet you. What do you want me to say to that? Yeah, everything here, this gym, I built that. I'm like, no, you sold equipment to the people who run this place, but that, okay, by all means. So that set the tone. During the meeting with the client, he was constantly interrupting me and trying to make me look stupid. Fine. Eventually, we have to do a training session, which I will lead, and he shows up again. So we're looking. It's all a bunch of offices, so we're looking for the right spot. He's with me, and he's doing his thing, and I've always let him yap. And we go to the wrong corridor. Somebody comes out like, "What are you guys doing here?" I'm like, "Excuse me, sir, we're looking for room XYZ." No, that's not here. Excuse me, sir, we'll go downstairs. Thank you. Turn around and we leave. And the guy starts, poking me. He was looking quite aggressive at you there. I'm like, well, it's okay. Yeah, I think he was, maybe gonna kick your ass. And I looked at him and I said something that I got from Mark, but actually it's true and I mean it. I said, it's been a while since I put somebody in the hospital, but I still know how to do it. And then I looked in his eyes and then kept walking. And then, nothing anymore. Stop talking. The training starts. He leaves after 5 minutes. So he saw me as just this big lump of meat walking around doing this and that, which little did he know that that's actually one side of what I have been doing for many decades with my life. I've been doing other things as well, and all of a sudden I had to show him, like, look, you can keep being an arrogant prick, but you're not intimidating anybody, and you're just poking the bear, and you just discovered that the fence is not that high, or somebody left the door open, and the bear just noticed that too. You want to keep going? Let's go. And that kind of the deterrence factor needs to be there, and that needs to be balanced then with the defense dilemma, which is incredibly difficult, can go wrong, and often does go wrong, because we have to do with human beings. There's this whole thing, and you have to forgive me that I don't remember the details, this is years ago, that one of the main reasons why Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait was because he thought the US was okay with it. And what happened is that one junior person or something along those lines, somebody who hadn't been into diplomacy or in office long enough, had a talk with him, and there was this miscommunication where they didn't say it clearly enough and so on, and Hussein thought, like, oh, okay, the Americans are not going to push back, I'm in. And that is the history of the human race. And one more, and then I'm going to stop. The Cuban Missile Crisis. So I read the letter that Khrushchev sent to JFK, and basically the situation is that we came this close to global nuclear war, this fucking close, because the American generals were saying, like, let's go to war, and the Russian generals were saying the same thing. And Khrushchev writes then, and he says, like, I've got these crazy maniacs beside me that want me to attack you. I don't want that. Mm-hmm. Surely you, sir, as... It's a beautiful letter that I think everybody should read, because this is at the highest level We're talking about the fate of humanity, basically. That it just boils down to human beings. And if you can indulge me one more, there's a story. I don't know if it's true, but apparently it's supposed to be true. That Ronald Reagan, who's hated by many people, actually is one of the people who ended the Cold War. We can discuss about the details. And he talked to Gorbachev, and they were, I think, in Russia or something. I don't remember sure where, and they went to some like a cabin or something at the lake. And he said, like, if there's an alien invasion, he asked Gorbachev, would you come to help us if they land in the U.S.? He said, of course. And I would do the same for you. Right, we're both human beings. We can start with that. And they laughed, and just the mood changed, and that. Long story short, hundreds of thousands of other factors happened, and then we eventually got the end of the Cold War. Not saying good thing, bad thing. Not saying that everything went afterwards was awesome. These are just examples of whatever happens at the highest level will always involve humans, and we are fallible, and we are polarized, and they can mess up just as much as you and I, or somebody who's yelling at the street protesting against something. I'm done.
That was very good. I don't know which way to take the conversation from there, because there was quite a few interesting points. I think the point of
wherever you want to take it, it's all good.
Well, I think that again, that aspect of time and conversation and interaction and engagement with the other side is again something that people forget, that it's not only peace and war. There's all these interesting steps in between where everybody's jostling for position or setting the field, or other things are going on, right? And I think that we forget that it's not only, again, it's that binary thinking. It's not only one thing or another, it's a constant process. I mean, many people in the irregular warfare space say that World War III has already started, that we're already in it, that the cyber war and the sabotage and the destabilization and the misinformation and the bots and all this kind of stuff is low-level war that has been going on for a really long time. I guess North Korea makes a whole bunch of money through scamming people online. It's one of its major sort of, sources of cash, which is really interesting. So again, there's always conflict somewhere. And again, if we bring it back to the personal from the global scale, the fear plays a part in that. And so for me, what I find interesting is, how can you manage these smaller steps? I say it in a way, it's like awareness, or this awareness of setting the field, or this participation, that there are clues. There's always things that are changing in the environment that gives you an idea about, I do this and it has this effect, kind of thing, that you can use in self-defense to become less afraid of, say, walking down the street, that you can also use in between, countries, between each other, talking to each other, or noticing now, especially in this age of like mass surveillance of what's going on, is that we have so much more information about stuff. And on a personal level, this weird zeitgeist that's going on with this polarization, I think is a mismanagement of all that information. Like, it all sounds scary, and all the news medias that are making money off fear are polarizing everybody because that's making them more money. But actually, to be able to sit and see your own sphere of influence and understand that you too have, information is good. It's just, you got to separate it from the noise, And the same way that on a grand scale, people are separating the noise away from what's actually important, even to the extent of Khrushchev writing a letter to Kennedy or whatever. It was like, there's a whole bunch of information that's coming. All right, what's actually important? Like, how can we affect this situation? It still comes down to that ability to filter the information, understand what's important, and that's through recognition, I think, through practice on a self-defense level, but then also kind of on a global scale. But I think in general, fear is bad. I think fear makes bad decisions on a global scale and on an individual scale, and seems like can't actually affect anything on a global stage. On an individual stage again, even though it seems kind of weird to go straight from like, the Cuban Missile Crisis to how you argue online. This idea of holding center and bringing people to center and together is actually a way to mitigate that tendency, is to try and lower the fear level.
Well, and Musashi would be proud of us because he said the ways in everything.
Yes.
So if it is, and I'm I've changed massively in my thinking. Let's say the last 5 to 10 years, and one of them is trying to be more principled, and apply the principle also when it's not really comfortable for me to do so, which is very, very hard. But I try a lot because I see that is the biggest issue I see right now with the polarization is this double standard that both sides have. Maybe over different things, but they complain about the other side, and then let's say half a year later, somebody on their side does the same thing. Like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. Yes, it is, and you know it, but you just don't want to admit it because you don't want to admit it to the other guys because they'll use it against you, as you would do to them if the shoe were on the other foot. And I'm over here just being an obnoxious Belgian and saying like, hey, you both did that. You both should be ashamed of yourselves right now. And you can shout at me, but I see what you did there. So
I guess
I don't know. Go ahead.
I agree with you. I don't think I'm as good a person as you. I absolutely agree with you that we are absolutely one-sided, but I think it's also very natural. I think it's a human, very deep conditioning to have opinions that save your own life. Like, I'm going to fight for things that I recognize much more than I'm going to fight for causes that I don't have any skin in the game in, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's a natural tendency. So, I've accepted my limitations and I am opinionated, but I'm also happy to say I'm totally opinionated. And of course I'm talking about it from here, and no, I don't really care about that issue so much because it's not my issue. It's like, yeah, I don't like this person, I do like that person, would they have been better? I don't know. It's kind of like, I'm happy to say that I'm totally wrong, but I feel like this. Tell me how you feel, And so it's having a sense of humor about it. It's much more about not, if I do something, I should let you do it too, rather than I shouldn't do something and you shouldn't. I'm taking the sort of the path of least resistance and going, yeah, I'm opinionated. I'm from where I am. I speak from where I am. These things bother me and they don't bother you. I don't care that they don't bother you, but I'm going to stick my oar in if it's my thing, right?
Yeah.
But I may be wrong.
That makes sense.
I may be completely wrong, but it's a way of seeing the world that maybe you don't have, and that's one of the reasons why sometimes I come to your page, especially about women's issues, for instance. I'm like, my experience is this, and maybe that is interesting because it's my opinion and it's just something to throw into the mix of the whole. But again, most people misunderstand it and think that we're against each other, where really we're just trying to put all the pieces of the complexity into the center.
Oh, I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there who think Maija and Wim are fighting again. And I'm like, no, we're not. You don't know. And we've discussed on my personal Facebook page as well, in the past, like some really in-depth discussions where we fundamentally disagreed.
Absolutely.
And as far as I remember, it pretty much every time ended like we need to, continue this over a drink or something. So, and I think that's the best way to go. And just to be perfectly clear, I try to be principled. I very much fail constantly because I am also very opinionated. And I'm like, well, this is wrong, and I'll tell you why it's wrong. But I have to hold back. And then I give you an example. I just said that earlier in our talk here that when you get people that are just spouting, talking points and just these very surface level statements that are just useless, and then I tend to write them off, and I'm like, I shouldn't do that, but instinctively I often do, or just like, I'm not even going to try to engage with you because everything that you just wrote, I don't think you say anything meaningful here. About 10 years ago, a really well-known martial artist, you know him too, and he wrote something on his Facebook page. I followed him. I didn't comment much, but I followed him, and he talked about something, and I said, look, at this stage, anybody who disagrees with me that this isn't the reality, I'm just not going to talk to you. And wow. all right. I was taken aback because I had a lot of respect for that person, and I'm like, you're gonna have to stop talking to me because I disagree with you. I see what you mean. I see why you care. I agree with you that there's fundamental problems here, but I very much disagree with what you just said. That like this is it. This is reality. And I'm like, and I left and I never came back. So and I shouldn't do that to other people. So I really try not to. But again, being human, I fail miserably very often.
Well, I mean, you and I have many friends in common, and I have had many of them around my kitchen table and spent many evenings over coffee and whiskey and other things disagreeing vehemently about everything. Most of my friends don't agree with my politics, at least to a certain extent. But we have good conversations and it's fun. And if you take that idea of conversation into the martial arts sphere, of course, that's my big thing, is my game that I like to play is not gotcha, because I think that's pathetic and cheap and not interesting. My interesting game is, what is my strategy if I had to try and get past this,
Yeah.
This is definitely like this kind of veneer. Is there a way in? What is that way? I am not at all invested on being successful, but it's almost like sparring. It's like you test it and you throw something over there and go, what happens when that comes back? What happens if I say this? What happens if I ask a question? What happens if I do this? And it's not cynical, because I'm actually interested, right? But there's also this sub-game going on about, what does it take to change somebody's mind? What does it take for them to say, okay, I see that point, but, which is what I want, right? What does it take? What is it? Where does that come from? And so I think there's a usefulness to facing confrontation, like having confrontation, because I think if you avoid confrontation all the time, even on a conversation space, you're not going to be able to deal with it in real life either.
Yeah, the way I experienced it a lot is when I started talking about political issues and so on, and people I've been called a hater of this and that president and a lover of this and that president, same presidents. And there's only right now, let me see, there's only one American friend of mine who knows not even half of my politics. And even we talked a lot of politics, but we never covered everything, because there's a lot of stuff that is local to where I live that is not relevant to where you live. So nobody knows my politics, because I haven't. It's not I don't want to talk about them. It's just that it never came up. A lot of stuff doesn't come up. Typical Belgian political issues that I feel very strongly about have zero relevance to your life, and will never have any no, I shouldn't say that. Maybe 0.000% whatever relevance one day maybe, but it's just that I can talk freely. That's how I feel. Whatever president you guys have says something that I disagree with, I can say that. If the other party gives the president a year later and I disagree, I'll say that as well. I don't care. I don't vote there. I'll criticize the French president all the time.
There's always something to criticize.
I don't live there.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, what bothers me is that I think people have assumed my politics and are totally sure what they are. And you just say, well, if you think this, that must mean all this is true too. And it's like, no, it really isn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because there's this piece doesn't mean that this whole thing is attached to it. It's complicated. There's this bit and this bit and this bit I don't like that bit and that bit, and I really believe this thing and I don't care about that. It's not what you think. You just think that if there's one piece of what you want to think as them, everything else is them too. And again, I think that's lazy. It's lazy thinking. It's that siloed thinking. It's like, I want to just be safe and agree with all the people over here. On the other hand, it's like people are like, oh, you must be one of those. It's like, well, okay. No, I'm not, but
I want to change tracks because last time we talked, you had your book out, and in the meantime, you've written 2 more books, well published them. So let's talk about The Hustler, Swordplay and the Art of Tactical Thinking. So, ta-da, for the people watching the video, Maija just showed it.
Yes, there is. Sorry.
That's okay. So what's it about?
So the first one had a bit of history, and it had like some kind of philosophy in there, but it was kind of like a how-to, and there's a whole bunch of drills in the first one, right? That's the first one. The second one, I talk more about psychology. It's more about all the influences, context, if you like, and the sort of I don't know, should I read the back? It was a while ago since I've written the third one. This one's kind of gone out of my mind, but it's
I know what I feel.
but it's kind of a more of a generalized view, sort of looking at all the different things that go into your opponent. Like, you can't have a fight without another human being in it, unless you're just by yourself having an episode, I suppose. Like, there's always a human being. Like, it's not an alien, it's not, the dog. Dogs are a lot simpler to fight, but it's a human being. And the human being, what makes a human being different from an inanimate object or anything else is the mind. And so the second book's a lot more about that, about all the ways that they might be seeing you, where they come from, what taboos they might have, what honor culture they might have, like all these sort of bigger ideas about what make somebody an adversary, and then what you can use about that information against them. So.
Nice. Could you give an example? Because it says, the art of tactical thinking. So, what would be an example of tactical thinking?
So basically, most people that spar me are bigger. They're mostly guys, right? There's not that many people that are smaller than me that I tend to fight with. So there's a whole bunch of assumptions about how they think I'm going to be and what they're going to do. Martial artist men tend to be aggressive and they always come forward. So I know that already. If somebody turns out to be a counter fighter and is watching, I know that they're higher level. The guys that always close in on me really fast, we're talking about swords, right? So we're not talking about empty hand, just so we're clear. Swords is my thing. So a longer blade, not like stabby assassination or knife fighting. We're talking about swords, right? And sword is a vehicle for understanding human behavior. So in a sense, sword itself there's a whole art about how to use it. But the fact that I have something that's about, the length of my arm, that's deadly between me and you have to get past this, means that you have to make better decisions about how you close distance on me, which is not really in there in the same way in empty hand, especially if there's a disparity in size and power. So the sword gives you time, and now they have to think. How do they deal with the fact that if I just wait for you, I can, you could just impale yourself on the way in, if that makes sense. So it brings the mind into the game a lot more and gives you that opportunity to tactically think. So if somebody's sparring me, they think that their size and their weight is going to make a difference, unless they're skilled. So if they don't close straight away, I know they're better than if they close straight away. Like, most people that close straight away are either stick fighters or empty hand fighters, because they think they can take a little bit of damage on the way in.
that always reminds me, there's this old song, what's it called, Dual Propaganda, from the 80s.
Yes.
And it goes, the first cut won't hurt at all.
Yeah.
The second only makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Third one, you're on your knees.
Yeah. I have that on 12-inch single.
And I always love that. I just listened to it like yesterday.
That's funny. Rave from the grave from the 80s, folks.
Yeah, we're getting old. We're joking about it online, is that we're getting grumpy in our old age and want to yell at kids to get off our lawn.
So that's an example.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sonny used to get everybody, if everybody was staying out, he would invite them to do an opening and they'd miss, and then he'd look at them and go, "What, your arm's getting shorter?" After that, everybody comes in, right? Does that make sense? Even if you look down and go, somebody's going to close on you. So that's the sort of thing. It's not really a mystery, but we all have these things that piss us off, that will make us angry, that will make us hesitate too. I don't hit women. If I'm there, does that make a difference to how they behave? Maybe. Yeah. So that it's that sort of thinking. So it's how to use somebody's personality, their background, if I know what it is, to my own advantage.
Nice. How do you? The book says the art of tactical thinking. Do you also talk about strategy, or is it just focused purely on tactics? Because it gets to be a little bit confusing at times for people to distinguish between both.
Well, the overall strategy of Sonny's stuff, which I think is very interesting, that was my teacher, it's a very counterintuitive system because it's the opposite of a lot of people. A lot of people do martial arts so they know how to do damage to somebody else. Sonny's system, the whole point is not to get damaged, which sounds very defensive and weak, but it's not, because sometimes me taking you out quickly is the way that I don't get damaged. Does that make sense? So the not dying part is the strategy. How do I not die? How do I go home? So the whole strategy is evolved around that. Not engaging, if I can, is a strategy to not die. If I'm far enough away, there's enough space. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. I can't run for shit. So everybody's like, oh, just do the Nike defense. It's like, are you sure? Because if that guy runs faster than me, all they have now is my back, and I'm not giving it to them. Right? So for me, I need to know how much time I need where running actually makes sense, or crossing the road makes sense or something, and when it's too late. So that's a strategy. If I can fake you out by noticing that you're about to do something and put you off, that's the same thing. You know, if you decide to take it further, I can lure you in by pretending to be in a certain way and then change my mind, or else I can be all like, you know, smile and twirl my sword and go, where have you been all my life? And make, you know, so, cognitive dissonance, right? So that was advice that Sonny gave me too. He's like, just do something super fancy and go, where have you been all my life? So that was a direct quote, you know. And then it's, if I do damage, I can't just do damage to somebody's, like their hand is going to be the first target, for instance. I can't just do damage, I have to tell them that they are damaged.
Yeah. There's one what do you call it, strategy or tactic, depends on how you view it, but cut the branches to bleed the tree, which is something I always liked, and I think it's an old Chinese one, but I could be mistaken, where you just you attack the limbs, you don't try to close anything that is within your reach. Could be a fingertip
cut
that
it
gets
off.
hit.
Yeah, people forget that you can empty hand hit arms too, like, you know, you can elbow and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's true, but
it works just fine.
But tactically, all this information is interesting, but how do you then use that to your advantage is the tactical question. It's like, if I get you to close quickly, what does that mean for how I have to have my weight in my feet, which way I'm going to step, and where my sword's going to be when you do that, right? And when to go, right? So those are all the sort of tactical ideas. It's like, I can't just know information, I have to turn that into something actually martially useful. Like, not getting hit is kind of fine, but like Rory's sort of golden rule about, you know, like the 4 parts you need, I can't just tend to do one of them, I need a whole bunch of them, you know, which is improve my position, make yours worse, you know, that sort of thing. You know, damage you, don't take damage, you know, those kind of ideas, right? Those are the sort of the 4 things that you want. And if you get one of them, which is I've stopped you momentarily, that's not going to stop everything. It needs to, they have to stop long enough for the distance to open that I can leave, or does that make sense? It's like, it's only the first step, so there's multiple steps that have to come. So then the tactical ideas, the practical aspects of then what I have, how I have to move, how, you know, where my sword is, what I'm targeting, and then the exit, which most people don't talk about, which Sonny was big on. It's like, you also have to leave after, there's the afterwards part, then that you know, those are all the things that we talk about in the tactical stuff.
When I teach my MMA students, when I do a technique, especially stand-up, mostly what I'm talking about is that you've got different things to look at. When you do your punch-kick combination, doesn't matter what it is, there has to be a setup, so you have to prepare it. You can't just go whatever. Setup can be something that your opponent does. It doesn't have to be you. He does something, that's the preparation, that's the setup. Then you have to, if you're not in distance, you have to close distance, you have to get there. Then you have to do the work, whatever that is, and then you have to get an exit, whatever that is. And you go through these steps constantly. It's just a checklist, you go over it and constantly. And I emphasize defense before, during, and after. Not before and after.
No, during too.
As well, that also helps. Yeah. And then we immediately get to things like, you know, timing, distance, angles, orientation of your body, and so on. One of the big differences, for instance, with MMA as opposed to, let's say, typically boxing, a little bit less so because we've had guys like Lomachenko making that very popular nowadays, is stance shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Is in mixed martial arts, you can be in a left lead, but due to circumstances, you're fraction of a second later, you're fighting in a right lead. And you need to be able to fight there. Whereas in boxing, that is like, no, you don't just switch leads, you stay there. And all the angles and traps and everything else tends to revolve around that. But when you've got a guy who constantly switches, or you have an environment in which you have to be able to do that, because it's going to happen whether you like it or not, then your tactics radically change.
Yes, they do.
And like you said, and then you've got this long, sharp, pointy thing in between you and him. Everything changes again, because I can flick out my fingers very, very quickly and hit you in the eye. It's going to be really annoying, but that's it. If you do that at the same speed, same distance with your sword or with a knife, we're talking about something completely different. So the taking damage is not a good strategy, because you can't win that fight. If somebody's got an edged weapon, well, you can try. I guess anything's possible. I wouldn't call it a good idea, but you can try.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those spectrum things where maybe you are going to take damage, maybe you take a little bit, but don't train to die. Don't. That's not the top level of skill. Train to not take any injury, maybe, but train to take as little as possible. That's the point. It's not like, oh, everybody gets hit, so I'll just take some. It's like, why choose that? That's just a lack of imagination that you could be better at it. And I'm not talking about street defense against like shank attacks or anything like that, please, everybody. So no questions about that.
Oh, it's just the oversimplification. It's like,
it's
expect
complicated.
to be cut. I'm like, oh, whatever. Yes, you should expect to be cut. I agree. However, that doesn't mean that this is your get out of jail free card for every crazy technique you want to do. You rushed in and you wanted to grab his head with both hands and poke his eyes out while he's stabbing you in the gut.
It's like,
that wasn't a good technique. Yeah, but I expected that. Yes, you still died.
Yeah. Be smarter. So Sonny's whole thing was, I think we talked about it before. If we talked about the first book, there's actually 4 outcomes. One which is win-win. That's like us both leaving, right? There's win-lose, lose-win, but there's also lose-lose, and especially with swords. Technically now, if I'm not walking away, I only have a 1 chance in 3 of getting away. And even there's the spectrum of how much damage I took doing it.
Those are not good odds.
Yeah, not good odds. They're terrible odds.
No.
Yeah.
So what would be the main message that you would tell people to, that you want them to take away from the book?
The second one. Because I wrote the third one. The second one is more that there's more stuff to play with. I have always fought from a disadvantage in that I'm always smaller and lighter than most people I face. So I could never overcome anybody, like just overpower and be like, I can't handle her, So I had to fight smarter. I was forced to fight smarter. And it was training with Sonny with swords that gave me that impetus of being able to use the psychological element and then have my movement be way better and more efficient, at being able to get away with stuff. And so the message of the second one is there's more to play with. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you're 6'6", 200-pound, gorilla who doesn't have to deal with anything. You don't need this necessarily, but maybe you're fighting 3 people and they got knives, so maybe you kind of do. Like this is a big skill, and so is everything that goes on with where you're looking, how you can distract people, people's psychology, all those flinch reactions that you can't control. Like there's a big field of affordances, should we call them affordances, that exists that most people don't come across to be able to use, and sword actually gives you that opportunity to play with them and then take them into the empty hand world or into other stuff. You don't necessarily need any of this, but if you want to play there, then I wrote a book about it.
And you just mentioned the third book, so that would be The Spy and the Rodeo Clown Swordplay in the Third Game. So that one's a little bit different, if I'm not mistaken.
This one is super nerdy. This is like at a higher level where you've kind of accepted the premise. But what it looks at, and I guess if you got this far through the conversation and rewind to our talk about war, I think this is where the crossover is very interesting to me, is setting the field before you go onto it. So one of the things I realized with Sonny was that there's all this before time, before things kick off, before somebody closes in, that you can, I'm not going to say control, but you can manipulate.
You can do things.
Yeah, you could do things in the before time. And I think people don't think of the before time at all. The before time in a self-defense situation is, at its furthest extent, is the minute that you see somebody put their attention on you. So from that moment where you've pinged somebody's attention, now you can actually manage that attention if you're smart about it. You know, you can stare back, you can move off, you can, you know, you could do a whole bunch of stuff to try and like cut it off at the pass before something happens. But as everything gets closer, you have different things that you can play with. You know, all the way until you get to the edge of range. Yeah. And then you have within range, you can also play with stuff too. But what I'm interested in the third game is all that before stuff. It's like, how do you manage that space and time before it kicks off? I remember one of the first practices that we did at Sonny's was, we trained in his living room. His living room was tiny. I'm going to say probably a bit about 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters in the middle of the room, like not big.
Yeah, I've seen the videos. Yeah. That's not big at all.
So there was like a couch on each side. There was like weapons altar, and then there was a TV stack and something else. And there was like a ceiling, like one of those table fans that was in the corner that was kind of blowing air. The space was small. If we were both standing on the flat sides of it, we were in range. The only place that we were out of range was in the diagonal corners from each other. So that was the space that we trained in. And one of the first drills that he did was, if he starts walking, you frickin' walk too. It's like not waiting and actually completely connecting to the movements of the other person is what you have to do. Actually talking to Casey Keckheisen, you know, one of the interesting things he said with shooting was, move first, then shoot. Don't shoot and then move, because you want to assume that you're already on the X. So already with that idea of if somebody's close to you, don't wait for something to kick off. Just, you know, move already. Mick Coop said something interesting about that. He's a trainer in the UK who basically said, if somebody's closing in on you, said, how do you know if they, you know, mean you harm as you're backing up? Turn the corner. If they turn too, that's a big sign that you're actually being targeted. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting information, right? So there's a lot of this stuff pre-close that you could recognize, but then this book is how you then do something useful with it.
That reminds me, this long time ago. In 1995, I competed in the World Wushu Championships in Baltimore. There's a picture of me standing. I was co-cornering one of our fighters, and what happened is that, so you've got the stage where everybody fights, and then a little bit further out, there's 2 chairs next to each other, and the next 2 fighters up have to sit there, so that they're not running around and whatever. And the coaches are there. So I'm standing behind the guy, and the head coach standing in front of him. So, and he's talking to our fighter, like I'm for the people, you know, not listening and not watching the video, I'm leaning forward, he's talking to our guy, but right next to him, like within arm's reach, is his opponent. So our coach, who's a little bit of a bastard, it's a very special case, he leans over, looks the guy dead in the eyes, and then just like rolls his eyes and looks away. just mind fucking that guy.
Yeah. But you see it all the time, right? So, at the weigh-ins and stuff. All of that is, you know, how people walk into the ring. It's the same shit whether it's sport or not.
I was in '93. I was in Moscow competing in the World Cup, and so we do the weigh-ins, you know, to get into the categories. And the guy in the French team, the captain of the French team, is in my weight class, and he's right in front of me. And he was always like, la Belgique, you know, because, you know, Belgium and France, we share a language. to a certain degree, and he was a special kind of guy. So, and he's right in front of me on the scales. I'm right behind him, and he just steps on the scales, and then he looks up and he's like, "Damn, I'm buff," and he walks off. I just couldn't stop laughing. I just couldn't help myself. I was snickering. It's like, "Oh, dude, come on." I was very young back then,
funny.
but I got it that what he was trying to do.
I do want to give another example though, because I think this is useful, because everybody thinks it is about looking intimidating, and sometimes it isn't. And
Yeah.
My boxing coach, very good, shout out to Miguel Lopez, he's a professional fighter. I mean, we live here in the Bay Area, which is a fairly dangerous city, Oakland, where I'm from. But we were talking about that, and he was talking about when he goes, if he's visiting a friend in a neighborhood that he's not from. So he's basically a stranger in kind of like a not a good neighborhood. And so we were talking about how he walks into that neighborhood, and he says, I don't go in looking threatening. Everybody that's on the corners, all the dealers, all the, gang members and stuff, they see a strange man, fit younger guy walk into the neighborhood. There's two things that I can be: a rival gang or an undercover cop. And I need to
Yep.
make sure that they know that I'm neither of those things, because those are the only two things that are threats to them. So when I walk into those neighborhoods, I'm like, hey man, how's it going? Nice to see you. Good? All right, da 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 da. So most people don't think about all that contextual awareness of who their audience is. Who is this person? How do they see you? Yeah, it matters.
I just finished reading, listen to the audio book of the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, which is fantasy world. And there's the idea is that what happens to the world after the bad guy wins. So the evil overlord wins, and then generations afterward. And so there's these basically guerrilla fighters who want to create a revolution, but they always have to hide who they are. So it's always misdirection, making sure you don't stand out. And there's the main character is a lot about her, especially in the first book, is how she's a thief, and her whole thing is that she cannot stand out because then she gets beaten, and she always manages the head thief, the boss of the gang, so he doesn't beat her up too much, and it doesn't always work. And so it's all about all the stuff that you say, like before the confrontation, before anything happens. How can I manage that? How can I avoid that? How do they look at me? How do I look at them? What do I say? And so all these kind of things. And I really enjoyed the way it was written. You have to like fantasy, not everybody does, but I'll put it in the show notes. But I like this kind of stuff because it's sometimes difficult to explain to people why and how it matters. And so I think that's maybe one of the main benefits of having a book like yours out there, is that, like you said, the third game, so people often don't think about it. It's just like, no, whatever, or they assume that they know how all that stuff goes, just by mere fact of being a human being, and ta-da, I can do this. Not really, but
Well, I mean, again, for me, sorry, again, interrupting, but I think it ties into a lot of the things we've been
fine.
talking about, is people don't know how other people see them. And you have to separate how they see you from how you can use that information against them in a martial sense. Or, on the other hand, if you're talking about making friends and influencing people, how to sell something to somebody or be friends with somebody, it's the same skill set. But you first have to understand what they see when they see you, and not be offended by what they see, and go, oh, interesting. It's like all these people that assume they know everything about me. I'm like, may all my opponents be as good as you. You can. It's the assumptions might be something that are useful to you. Like, that's okay that they don't know who you are. And
Yeah.
is what you're projecting what they see? You don't know that. So how do you know that? Well, you find out. It's like, what do you see? It's like, oh, interesting. You just make them talk. It's very, it's useful. It's like active listening they talk about when they're trying to get information out of people. It's a very, very similar situation, is that you throw stuff out and see what comes back, and then you know much more about them than they kind of know about you. And that's how you keep the asymmetry in there and get the upper hand.
Yeah, I really like what you said, is that people don't often realize how other people view them. Many years ago I realized that I have resting grumpy face. So my neutral expression is people think grumpy or angry. I'm not at all. I could be thinking about something awesome, but that's just the way that my face just relaxes, I guess. Nothing I can do about it. So I started a long time ago when I'm out in public, modulating that to the environment. And especially when I go into a store or am somewhere or just ask a clerk somewhere something, I'm making an effort to open my eyes and smile and talk softly to avoid people getting freaking out when they see me. Because I've had that too when I wasn't aware. This is not that long ago after there was a terrorist attack here, and there was a bunch of guards at supermarkets, and we were going somewhere. I was in a hurry and I just rushed over, and I see the guy tense. I'm like, oh no, Wim, stop, chill, relax, smile. So over the next few steps I just rearranged my face and added to it, and everything was fine. But just being again, it's almost a superpower nowadays, understanding that people view you differently than you might think how you are.
Yeah, and I think people get offended that they have to change something. I want to be myself. It's like, yeah, you can be yourself.
You can be.
However, you can also make life nicer and better. You can get what you want easier. You can manage situations better by participating in the situation and not caring about being you. And again, it's that separation of understanding how to get what you want. People are sort of offended. Why can't I be me and have everybody treat me like I want? It's like, because maybe that's not how the world works.
The world's not about you.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I see that desperate need to be yourself all the time as fear again of being inconsequential and insignificant. And maybe this, like, how do I stand out thing is part and parcel of this whole thing. And it's just like, you can be you. You are you. You still are. It's just that in situations you can manage that. They call it code switching now, I guess, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's like, why not? Yeah, maybe you get peopled out and you don't want to be nice anymore. That's fine, then stop being nice. But the fact that you can't change how you appear, that you can't participate in the interaction in the way that will get you what you want, I think is sad, because you can. They said that in the olden times they said, what's the definition of a gentleman? A gentleman makes everybody feel comfortable, in every space they're in. Are you all right? How are you doing? That's nice. Go talk to these people, right? It's this idea that you can facilitate situations, like you have the power to do that. I think it's again that separation from somebody throwing shit at you and going, oh, interesting, they're throwing shit at me. What do I want to do with that? Do I want to just let it go by? Do I want to calm them down? Or do I want to give them a cognitive dissonance that now they don't want to attack me? It's like having that idea that you could control your reaction and then the situation, de-escalation or escalation or whatever you want to do with it, is huge, I think, and perhaps lacking. We've forgotten that we can do it.
All right. I'm going to put the links to the books in the show notes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For everybody, the show notes is always easy. It's wimsblog.com/ the number of the episode. So just check the title of this episode wherever you're watching or listening, and that's the link where you will find it. We have to move on over to the Patreon bonus part, the second part of the podcast, where Maija will answer the questions of my patrons. I've got a few good ones around. They're always fun. They're always a lot of fun. And we can swear as much as we like. We can do it now too, but then, some podcast outlets get upset over that. So thank you so much, Maija. This was awesome as always. Where can people reach you?
I have a Patreon, Art of Deception, the Art of Deception on Patreon. There is no free content, sadly, for people. It is a paid only, but that's where all my current writing and content is. I do seminars and things that you can catch me on. You can find me on Instagram at randomflowmaija. But if you want to friend me, don't just send me a request. Write me a message. That's how you'll actually get onto my list. Tell me why we should be friends. If it's somebody I don't recognize, and I'm like, no, so old-fashioned.
All right, I'll add. No, I'm just the same. My personal Facebook page is personal. Nobody gets in if I don't know you. I'll add those to the show notes so everybody can find them there. Well, folks, we are going to head on over to the Patreon side. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to support the show, just find us there. There's a lot of stuff there, and I'll talk to you guys next time.